Tonight on a new piece. Why don't you give us a little preview? Give us a new piece preview of something coming out on 538 on the mock drafts. What are you guys doing with mock drafts?
We're not actually doing much, but I ran into a gentleman, a guy named Benjamin Robinson, and what he's been doing is pretty incredible. He's collected 2,000 mock drafts going back from last June to yesterday, basically. And he's characterized them in terms of if it's an expert, if it's the media, if it's just a fan mock. And so we have a date variable, we have the pick itself, we have this characterization, this bucket, whether it's one of those three sources, and so what we're able to do is look at the change over time of a draft pick, and he actually did the value of the mocked value of their pick, and then also kind of he back tested it, and he found that just these kind of naive mocks that kind of amplify and echo one another, they do a fairly reasonable job of predicting the first round, and he found in 2018 he did a similar thing, and he had 500 mocks. And I believe it explained 60% of variance or something around there. He looked at median and weighted average and all these different things. And so it does a reasonable job of telling us who's likely to be picked in the first round. A less reasonable job about actually getting the team player match correct and the absolute value of the pick correct. But it does give us a general sense of, who's going in that first round. Mm-hmm. And so I use that to kind of look at the change over time for some of these top prospects, guys like A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf. We're on the same team, Ole Miss. One went up, the other went down. Brown's stock has dropped over time, and DK Metcalf's risen and fallen, but is generally higher than Brown's now, even though A.J. Brown had better production metrics and for all intents and purposes was a better prospect to start with. So kind of understanding that dynamic, I looked at a few other defensive ends and as well as the two tight ends out of Iowa, which are pretty interesting.
So what other trends did you see on what's driving? So one of the interesting things that's going on here is you're not talking about ultimate performance. You're just talking about when the guy is going to be taken. So we do, you follow the draft, especially, after you clear the Super Bowl, you roll into the combine, all the data start coming in, people start talking about it, and it is interesting to watch. Like, prospects float up, prospects float down. Are there any patterns that you see? We've talked about it on the show over the last couple of months. Quarterbacks just tend to float up the draft. It's every year, it seems. I could be wrong, but if I had to say from a distance, it seems to me like the average first two round quarterback expected draft slot drifts up between January and April. Just inevitably, no matter where we start, the stock of NFL quarterbacks goes up over time.
I'm looking at all the QBs, and it looks like only one has a negative ADP differential over the period from last July to date. So I would say you're correct.
You're talking about mock draft.
Mock draft.
Basically expectations, expected draft order. Because one of the things I think you would say, and Benjamin Robinson would say probably from his data, is that these mocks do a reasonable job of forecasting the order of these guys.
Yeah, they do a reasonable job. The biggest riser, it appears, looking at the data, was Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
He went from he was mocked to be about 26th and rose now all the way to, I guess his average right now is 1.9, which is the top. But, gentlemen like even Drew Lock rose quite a bit. Daniel Jones rose quite a bit. And even my guy Will Grier shot up the charts. So I think your intuition is spot on.
Is this a crowd? I mean, how does this work? These mock drafts?
Josh said that. So again, we're talking about work by Benjamin Robinson, who's got a website, and he's putting some things together, got some data, and Josh characterized it as 2,000 mock drafts since last year, dated, so people are updating their mocks, and coded for level of expertise, essentially fan, media, expert. And this isn't just idle work, because teams need this information when they're deciding when to take players, when to make trades, how aggressively to draft players. It's one of the most difficult things that general managers have to do in the draft is decide, okay, this is a guy I want. I could take him now, but I'll be paying a little high for him given the value of the draft pick, or I can wait and I can hope to get him around later. But is he still going to be there? And so there's a risk-taking thing there, and the best drafters tolerate that risk, but you end up losing some players every now and then. So having some sense of when they're going to go is actually a really important input to their process. So
fascinating. I had considered whether or not internally any teams were using this kind of public data to help with that kind of decision making that's interesting here.
So different teams build different models, and God knows I haven't seen them all. But you can just go to the mocks. That's one thing. But you can also have an analyst build these models. So some teams will have an analyst who'll build a model and have a forecast on every player, and it'll be dynamic in that 10 picks in. That analyst will update the model and say, now, this guy's going to go. And they'll turn to him during the draft and say, what's the forecast for how much longer is this guy going to be on the board? And, of course, there's always a range around that. But an analyst, given the information these days, and every year that goes by and more mocks are available and more data on the draft are available, that forecast turns out, it gets a little tighter all the time. And it's helpful. Listen, this raises an interesting question that came up in an ESPN article. Did you see this article about the Mahomes trade on ESPN? It ran the front page for a while, and they're saying this is the trade that shook up the draft, shook up the NFL.
I think I saw it in passing. Didn't dive deep.
Okay, so this is about the Mahomes trade. The Chiefs 2 years ago going up from number 27 in the first round to number 10 in the first round, and they got Mahomes. And Mahomes, of course, has been a very exciting player ever since he started playing this past season, and presumably going to be a stud for a long time. So they're just kind of reifying the Chiefs and anybody who was involved with this trade. And they're talking about how acute the analysis was that forecasted they got to go to this number 10 spot, because if they waited any longer, they were going to lose him. But, of course, you want to wait as long as you can. And it just strikes me as, too
kind
much.
Kind of too retrospective of an analysis.
Yeah, exactly. To say, well, one, we're writing this whole article because it worked out well.
Yeah.
I mean, how many trades have we seen up for quarterbacks that didn't work out well? Where are those articles? And then we're telling these stories about how precise our judgment was when there's no way they could be that precise. I mean, we're sense of looking at these things, Josh. You've just been crunching through 2,000 of these things. I mean, how precise can you really be on where a guy is going to be drafted?
Yeah, and I guess just to put numbers on that, you said that these mock drafts do pretty well. For a particular player in a particular slot, like what's the plus minus? What's the standard deviation basically on or I guess the error that these mock drafts typically commit?
Looking through Ben's work, I believe it was around 8 or 9 picks either way.
Yeah,
that's in the top round. Just to you're not picking the 150th within plus or minus 8.
Like 30.
At least much bigger.
Okay, fantastic. Exactly. All right, listen, man. Josh, tell us what else you're thinking about. What are you working on? What's next? What's the next 538 article going to be? Another question, whichever one you want to go. How are you going to take in the NFL draft? How are you going to consume it over the next few days?
I'm going to consume it, unfortunately, without a beer in hand, because I have to write a quick response piece as soon as it's over.
Oh, really? Okay.
But it will be in a bar environment, so I'll be drinking a beer in spirit. But in terms of then that answers your other question. What's next? Basically, I'm just going to go through and see how well these mock drafts did in terms of predicting the actual order of the NFL draft. And it's really interesting. There's a website out there that actually tracks the expert mockers, and I interviewed one of them, the guy that was at the top of the leaderboard last year, and he basically said you should be able to get 26 of the 32 first-round draftees just falling out of bed.
Really?
That's easy to do.
Hold on, you mean 26 out of 32 regardless of where they go? You don't mean pick the actual destination? Correct. Okay, got it. Yeah.
Correct. And he was able to get 10 to the team. Okay. And that was marvelous. So 30% roughly.
Wow.
And that's about as good as a human can do, apparently.
Yeah, that's a good